Good afternoon, coolest coast. It is time for an episode of Book Banter. Good afternoon and welcome to Coffee on the Coast. I'm your host today, Tina Prigge, welcoming back Therese Horstketter from Manitowoc Public Library for an episode of Book Banter. Hi, Therese.
Hi.
What a great thing for us to do on the very last day of May.
Yep, it is. Always a good thing.
It is a good thing. So you've got some recommendations for us, and there's one that I'm super intrigued by. So I was thinking about saving that one for last. You've got
Okay.
like a unique kind of double book, unless you want to
Yeah.
start with that.
No, we can do that one last.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
So let's start with this one's kind of a departure from some of the book recommendations that you've given us before. But I know that there are so many fans of Dave Grohl and
Oh, yeah.
Nirvana and Foo Fighters. And
Yep.
so tell us about Dave Grohl, the storyteller.
Well, I have to say, this is out of the books we're discussing today. It's the only one I'm not finished with, and only because I am really enjoying it slowly. It's nice to pick it up and read a few stories and then go back to another book and then come back to it again. I am just loving it. I actually bought the book for our son for a gift, and they're one of his favorite bands, and he really enjoyed it, and he brought it back to me and said, you have to read it, you're going to like it. And we share a love of a certain amount of reading and music, and so it's just a really fun thing, because then I'll text him when I get done with the story and say, oh, I just learned about this. He played with Iggy Pop, or he was asked to be Tom Petty's drummer when he was young, and different things along the way that are just so much fun. And he is truly a wonderful storyteller. He has a
Ooh.
good voice, and it's just reading it, you just get so much of feeling like you know him. It is really a great book. And I think even people who he's not their favorite or anything, but I think they would still really enjoy it. It's a good book, and he doesn't go exactly from youngest to where he is now. There are stories along the way that kind of jump around in time, but really, really a good book. I'd recommend it to anybody. I like biographies to start with also, but yeah, this is just, and he's still such a very their person. It's not someone who is writing about their life that, you know, the majority of it was years ago,
Oh, right,
with what
right.
they did. And this just feels it just still feels so fresh when you read these stories.
Right, because he's
Yeah,
still actively creating
right.
content in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's beloved by many, many fans,
Oh,
but it's interesting
definitely.
to hear the high praise so that even if somebody isn't necessarily a devoted fan of Nirvana or Foo Fighters or the
Right.
other interests that he's been involved with, that he's a good storyteller.
Yep. Yep. I've got about a quarter of it left yet, and I'm just looking forward to it.
There is one book that I had that I loved it so much. I still have like the last 5 pages. I just for a couple of years now, I've just been like, I just don't want it to end.
Right, right. Because other ones that you want to rush through, and I gotta see what happens. I gotta see what happens at the end. And this is like, no, I just wanted to keep going. It's wonderful.
So I was looking at it on the Libby app, and there is an audio version of the book,
There
and
is.
apparently it's read by Dave Grohl
Yes.
himself.
I just checked that out today here at the library because my son was talking about getting it, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna pick it up, see if he wants to borrow it, and yeah,
That's cool. So
yeah.
what I love too about this is that you're telling us it kind of crosses generations. Like it's
Oh,
a reason that you're
definitely,
bonding with your son over a book. That doesn't always
definitely.
happen, right?
Yep, yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, moving on, I think in a completely different direction. Tell us about Small Mercies, a novel by Dennis Lehane.
He is one of my favorite authors, and you'd probably be aware of some of his previous Mystic River, Shutter Island, Gone Baby Gone. Gone Baby Gone was one of my favorite previous ones of his, and they did make that into a really good movie also. But I just like his writing. I've read a few others by him, and this one I was happy to see a new one coming out by him. This has to do with in the 70s when they started busing um, and when they started busing. So, moving students, from one area to another to combine students, racially mixing. And boy, it is a really good book, and it's really also really hard to read. I mean, it's just a hard, it hits you hard, put it that way.
Hmm.
Um, It is, and it centers around one woman in Boston, and she lost one son to drugs. Her daughter has now disappeared, and this is a time when there were a couple of guys in that area that you knew were the big drug runners. They could have someone killed when they wanted. It was like gangsters. I guess is the thought that I have, that they can just do whatever they want and people know to be afraid of them and not cross them. And so there's a lot all mixed up with her and her family. And boy, this woman is tough. And her friends, and like I said, it's a very good read, but it's a tough read too.
Yeah, so it's a hard topic, right?
Yep, it is. It is. And just what she's gone through is, and going through the whole time in the book is just unimaginable to me. And yeah.
So it's a novel, but is it more of like historic fiction?
Um, it is enough because of, yeah, the time and what's happening in the book, definitely. But yeah, just another book I'd really recommend. And but yeah, just just a hard one.
Yeah, I think I saw a little blurb by Stephen King that strongly recommended the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So not necessarily a feel-good book, but
No,
a
no.
really good
There
book.
there are a few moments, but not not many.
How does this compare? How does this one stand up to the other Dennis Lehane novels that you've liked?
I think as good. I think this one was tougher. When I mentioned Gone Baby Gone, that was about a missing child. And so there is, what people are going through with that. But with this, boy, it just, everybody is so hard on each other. And then what's going on, like you said, historically there. And so this just has a whole different feel of, even though it's a hard subject, totally different. And yeah.
Yeah, I know people often wax philosophic about like the good old days, but it's important to remind
Mm,
ourselves with pieces of work like this that it wasn't always like wine and roses.
right, right.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, I'm going to pull up this next one. It is Going Rogue by Janet
Mm,
Ivanovich. Now, I see Janet Ivanovich's name all over the place. Like you can't, you
right,
almost trip over her if you go to a bookstore or the library. I have never
right.
read a Janet Ivanovich book. So tell me about Going Rogue.
So I usually don't bring in too many books that are in a series, but and this is her 29th in this series with Stephanie Plum, who is a bounty hunter. She works for her cousin, and anybody who reads the books knows these characters already. But this one, I had not read all of hers lately. I want to say I read quite a bit of the series and then kind of went away from it. Sometimes it can get repetitive. And so I had just kind of not maybe read the last few. And then this one, though, there's a different main character that gets to be the real kind of main character and have more of, um, well, she's a secretary and she's always there, that she's pretty tough because of the job involved. But um, she gets a much bigger part in this book, and I like that. I thought it was pretty nice that it was centered on her, and it just felt a little fresher to me, and I was really happy with the book. And I thought, if there's anybody else like me that you've kind of gotten a little bored with the books or anything, I thought this was a nice fresh one coming in 29th in the series.
And so
So
you don't have
yeah.
to have the previous books under your belt to tackle this one?
No, because they always describe the characters enough so that you're kind of refreshed on who they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about, I read the, cover blurb, and it
hmm
talked a little bit about how there was a woman who works, is it like a pawn shop, that type of thing?
Um,
And she gets kidnapped
right. So
and
that's Connie, the secretary I mentioned.
okay.
So she does. She gets kidnapped because actually it is a bail bonds
Oh,
office.
okay.
So Stephanie, the main character, the bounty hunter, her cousin Vinny owns it. And so yeah, they all kind of don't love Vinny, but they're still there and doing their jobs. And so anyway, they something was lost, and so other people took Connie hostage till someone gets this back for them. So that is the kind of the gist of the book. But I just thought it was a nice little twist in there with having her being a bigger part of it.
Nice. Okay, very nice. Is it a pretty quick
Yeah.
read? Is it
Oh
written in
yeah.
a way that, yeah.
Yeah, it goes pretty quick.
I'm kind of thinking this would be like a good vacation recommendation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Let's move on to this one. I love the cover. He Said He Would Be Late, a novel
Yes.
by Justine Sullivan.
I picked it up. It was kind of funny. I was looking for books with flowers on their covers for a display I was doing. That's how I found this one. And anyway, it is about a couple that is pretty, they're a younger couple. They are pretty well to do. And he is a banker. She is not working outside the home now. They have a very young child. And she happens upon, well, he has to work late often, never thinks anything of it until his phone goes off while she happens to be near it. And she sees a text from someone with a little kissy emoji saying, "Thanks for the help last night," and whatever else there. And so now her head is spinning with, I never gave this a thought, we're fine, and is something happening? So this goes through quite a bit of how she feels just being a newer mother and dealing with a lot of people in her life, and how this comes out, her fear about what's really going on in her marriage. And she does some rather weird things to try and figure it out, but it's not really a comedy, but she just does go kind of overboard with some things. But I guess people might if they were worried about that, and just whichever way you approach things to deal with them.
Right.
So, but that is the gist of the book. And
So she's got sort of a perfect life, but then kind of
Yep.
devolves into a madness
Yep,
over
just
this
from-
fear
Yep,
spurred by
just-
a text.
Uh-huh.
Aw.
That's what it took to set this in motion.
So is it a mystery, would you say? Is it suspense? Where does this go?
Well, there's the mystery throughout, because there's nothing easily. She does see a therapist, and the therapist even says, "Did you just plain ask him about it?" And she can't. And so it does stay a mystery because, it works its way through the book.
So are we happy at the end?
Um, hmm, we'll just leave it for you to decide.
You've got to read it for yourself.
Yes, you do.
Therese will divulge no
I
spoilers.
will say neither way.
This librarian is not spoiling anything for you.
No way.
Cool. Okay, so now this, at first I was really surprised by the image, and then I read the description, and then I was super intrigued. So this is actually a double book. Double the
It
thrills,
is.
double the chills, a face in the crowd, the longest December.
Yes.
Tell me more.
And so it's a thin book. I have it here on my desk.
Ooh, let's see.
It is a fairly thin book to hold two good stories. And it does start out with this one, Face in the Crowd, and then you flip it over and read it from the other direction.
So how does that work? Do they like meet in the middle?
Yep,
or
they do. They do.
Okay.
And both good stories. A Face in the Crowd has to do with a man who is retired. His wife has passed away, and he's, making supper, watching baseball, and he notices a kid that's standing up and waving, behind the batter's box, and he's like, "Oh, good for you, you're on TV." He's being a little cranky, watching it, and he had to, when they moved, he gave up his old favorite baseball team, and now he's adjusting. But as he's watching, he sees someone like 3 rows in, and the person shouldn't be there because they died numerous years ago. And they look just the same, and he can't believe it. Well, then other things, it just kind of, he keeps seeing other people in the crowd. And it's just good. It's Stephen King taking a baseball game and making it creepy, and where's it going? So it was, I read that one. Really, it's like a 60-page story, and it just keeps going. I read it in one night, and then the other one I actually just read last night, and The Longest December is about a couple who have lived in their house for a long time. They have a son who is just out of college, or just finishing college, and all of a sudden there are police cars in the middle of the night next door, and they are looking for the man who lives there, saying that they believe he murdered people. And they can't believe it. This guy was just at their house for Thanksgiving. He's lived there for how many years next to them, and they really are really good friends. And the the dad and the son would go fishing with this guy Jimmy, and they just can't believe this is happening. Well, so then, of course, because they were known to be good friends, they get involved with the police. The police are questioning them for anything, and then they're questioning each other, like, did you notice anything? Did you ever think anything was off? And so the guy's missing, and they're finding body parts at his home. And so they kind of can't deny that something happened. They just still can't believe it's him. So that's where this one goes.
Wow. So are these new? Are these relatively new?
This is new. In fact, I was really happy to see, because, Stephen King's had some really good ones again lately. For a while, he took like a little different way with some of his writing that I can't say I kept up with everything. But then as he's had some newer things in the past few years, I've kind of come back to Stephen King a bit more and really looked for things coming out. This was very good. He also has another one. But actually, so A Face in the Crowd is Stephen King and Stuart Onan writing together. The other one is a gentleman named Richard Chismar. And so not Stephen King involved in this, but he put these two books together.
Huh.
And it is Cemetery Dance Publications, which I thought, oh, is that going to be a really creepy logo or something? And it really wasn't. It's a really simple logo. I just happened to look it up today too. And they have a little blood running, but not, it wasn't an over ghoulish kind of website, but yeah.
Okay, so then, so taking that into account and knowing Stephen King's body of work, is it horror? Is this?
I would say.
Okay.
I would say there's enough of that, and horror, mystery combined, and yeah, just the way he can make things horror from very basic things in life.
I think it was a number of book banters ago. You had recommended a book by him called, I think, Elevate.
Oh yes, Elevation.
Yeah, Elevation.
Yeah, that was very good.
Good story, but it wasn't really.
Yes, it wasn't really horror. No.
Yeah, it was just like the very extremely curious or surprising. So this one isn't that. The Faces in the Clouds.
This is just different. I shouldn't say just different. It is what I would expect from him in this first one. Okay. And I can see why he teamed up for the way this book is put together.
Does it keep you up at night?
Yeah. I don't think so, unless police cars show up next door to our house. But, that might make me think a bit more, but no. Okay. It's not quite that kind of, yeah.
And is this a first novel for Richard Chismar? Or is he
I don't think it is. And actually, I did read somewhere along the way that it started as a novella, and he enlarged it a bit for this. So,
okay. Cool. Yeah. So, do you think this is a new trend?
More, though.
Is this like a new trend, the mashup of two books together?
I don't know. They said something about this style being kind of an old style that they brought back, maybe.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting, and it's wonderful. I am not normally a short story person with more mainstream things, but with something like this that packs a lot into a shorter story with, the Stephen King touch. Yeah. It says actually here, the write-up I have says, it's a unique new book published in the old-fashioned double tradition. So it must have been used more that I'm not really ever aware of.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
If you had to guess, how many books within the Manitowoc Public Library would you estimate are that double flip style?
I really don't know if there are more. I'd have to ask someone else and see if we do have any.
Okay.
Because for all the things I handle, even if I don't read them, I really don't remember.
Yeah. And could you look up a book based on that? Like if you didn't know what the content was, the authors or anything, could you just say, I want a double flip kind of book?
I would have to ask someone else here that really sees the majority of them coming in, and to see if we have more like this.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Therese, thanks for the great recommendations today. A really varied selection. I can tell you're enthusiastic about all of them, so I really appreciate it.
Yep. Very, very. I was really glad I had time to read them all and really get them finished, because some it's like, oh, I just can't make it. I'm trying to read another one here. But yeah, they were all good reads.
So if a person hasn't read any of the ones that you recommended today, which one would you start with?
Oh, well, if you like Stephen King, there you go. You've got two short stories. But The Storyteller, get started in that. And like I said, it's something you can stick with and you're going to love it, or you can set it down in between and read another kind of book and still go back to this and just love it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And people will definitely think you're cool if you're reading it.
Yes, they will.
My guest today was Therese Horstketter of Manitowoc Public Library for this episode of Book Banter. Therese, thank you so much for taking the time and bringing us new recommendations. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I love doing this.
We'll see you again next month. I'm your host, Tina Prigge. We are signing off. See you next time on Coffee on the Coast.